My boyfriend said, "I am using your frozen eggs whether you're ready or not." The clinic said the paperwork was already moving. I froze them before cancer treatment. I said, "That's illegal." Then I called my attorney, the clinic, and filed an injunction. When the clinic revealed he'd forged my signature on release forms, I understood something I wish no woman ever has to learn. Sometimes the person who says they want a future with you is really trying to steal one from you. Hello, everyone. My name is Evelyn Hart. I'm 31 years old, and 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Even now, saying that out loud does something strange to me. Not because I've forgotten it, because some experiences never fully move into the past. They just stop being loud every day. I was 26 when a doctor told me I had ovarian cancer. Everything after that moved fast. Appointments, surgery discussions, treatment plans, and one devastating conversation I never expected at that age. My oncologist explained chemotherapy might permanently damage my fertility. If I wanted a biological chance someday, I needed to preserve it before treatment. And suddenly, before I had even fully processed staying alive, I was being asked to make decisions about children I might want someday. It felt cruel, so I did it anyway. I went through hormone injections, monitoring appointments, egg retrieval, consent paperwork, legal documentation, all while emotionally trying not to fall apart. There's a specific kind of loneliness in making future decisions while you're terrified you may not even have one. Eventually, the clinic successfully preserved 3 viable eggs. 3. That number became strangely sacred to me, not because it guaranteed anything, because it represented possibility. Hope preserved in cold storage. The version of my life cancer didn't get to erase, and because of how serious the process was, the consent rules were strict. No access without direct authorization. No release without verified approval. Everything legally documented. I signed every page myself, initialed every clause. Because when life reminds you how fragile control really is, you become very protective of the few things still left in your hands. The treatment worked. The surgery was brutal. Chemo was worse. Recovery was slow, humiliating, and lonely in ways healthy people rarely understand. But I survived. That word sounds triumphant. Sometimes it is. Sometimes surviving just means you keep waking up. I stayed in remission. My scans remained clear. My doctors remained cautiously optimistic. But fertility-wise, the damage was real. Natural conception became highly unlikely. Not impossible, technically. Doctors love that word. Technically. But realistic? Number. Those frozen eggs became my most meaningful biological chance, which matters for what comes next. Because I need you to understand this clearly. Marcus was never fighting me over a vague future dream. He was trying to access something finite, something irreplaceable, something born from pain. I met Marcus at a mutual friend's birthday dinner 2 years ago. He was charming in the way that doesn't feel dangerous at first. Not loud, not flashy, just attentive, funny in a dry, intelligent way. The kind of man who remembered details from previous conversations and made you feel seen instead of pursued. After everything I had been through medically, that kind of gentleness felt intoxicating. Because illness changes dating. People don't talk about that enough. You start wondering when to disclose things, how much to explain, whether someone will see you as complicated before they see you as lovable. I told Marcus about the cancer around 4 months in. Not dramatically, just honestly. One quiet dinner, low lighting, half-finished wine. The kind of conversation where your chest feels tight the entire time because vulnerability always carries risk. I told him everything. The diagnosis, the surgery, the chemo, the fertility damage, the frozen eggs. Marcus took my hand and said, "I'm just glad you're here." And God help me, I believed him completely. He didn't flinch, didn't pity me, didn't make it weird. If anything, he became even more attentive afterward. That's what makes betrayal so disorienting. It doesn't begin where you expect. If cruel people looked cruel immediately, far fewer women would love them. Over time, we became serious. Weekend routines, shared grocery lists, extra toothbrush in my bathroom, family introductions, conversations about the future. And yes, conversations about children. Marcus wanted kids. So did I. Eventually. That word mattered to me. Because wanting children someday is not the same thing as consenting to become a parent now. And every time the fertility topic came up, I was clear. Crystal clear. The eggs were mine. The decision would happen only when I was emotionally ready, legally secure, and in a relationship stable enough to survive the enormous pressure fertility treatment brings. I wanted marriage first, or at minimum, a formal commitment, shared finances, a home plan, real preparation. Marcus always agreed, at least outwardly. Looking back, I wonder how often women mistake silence for understanding. Because a man nodding is not the same thing as a man respecting your boundary. The shift started about 3 months before everything exploded. Small at first. Comments, timing pressure, comparisons. My sister already has 2 kids. I don't want to be an old dad. We keep talking about someday. At first, I treated it like ordinary relationship tension, normal life planning anxiety. But then the conversations changed. One night at dinner, Marcus leaned back and said, "You already froze them. Wasn't that the whole point?" I looked up slowly. "For when I'm ready." He gave me a tight smile. "When we're ready." That tiny correction sat with me, because language matters. When I'm ready respected autonomy. When we're ready, quietly assumed shared ownership. I noticed it, but I did what women in love often do. I explained instead of confronting. "I'm not saying no," I told him. "I'm saying not yet." He asked what yet meant. I said, "Moving in, engagement, planning, stability. This isn't ordering furniture, Marcus." He laughed, but not warmly, and something cold brushed the back of my neck. Not fear. Not yet. Just discomfort. The kind you explain away because love makes optimism feel smarter than instinct. Then came the Wednesday phone call. I was at work reviewing contracts when Marcus called, then called again. Then immediately a third time. That alone made my stomach tighten. I stepped into the hallway and answered. His voice sounded oddly upbeat. Too upbeat. Like someone delivering good news. "Hey," he said. "So, I went to your fertility clinic today." Everything inside me went still. "What?" "Your clinic." "Why?" A short pause. Then, to get things moving, I gripped the phone tighter. "What things?" "The fertility process." The hallway suddenly felt too narrow. Too bright. Too hot. I forced my voice steady. "Marcus, what exactly did you do?" He exhaled like I was being difficult. And then he said the sentence that split my life in two. "I handled the paperwork." I stopped breathing for a second. "What paperwork?" "The authorization forms." Silence. Then, "They needed your signature." Another pause. Casual. Weightless. So I signed it. And in that exact moment, every warm memory I had of him cracked straight down the middle. For a second, I genuinely thought I had misheard him. Not because the words were unclear. Because some sentences are so outrageous, your brain rejects them before your heart can catch up. "The authorization forms," Marcus repeated, sounding mildly annoyed that I needed clarification. "They needed your signature, so I signed it." I leaned harder against the office hallway wall because suddenly my legs did not feel reliable. "You signed my name?" "Yes." Like it was obvious. Like we were discussing a delivery receipt. Not medical consent. Not reproductive access. Not the last biological chances cancer had left me. Just paperwork. "Marcus," I said slowly, each word sharpened by disbelief, "tell me exactly what you did." His sigh came through the phone immediately. The sigh of a man who thought I was making this difficult. "I went to the clinic. I told them I was your partner. We've talked about kids. I said we were ready to move forward." "We?" "Yes, Evelyn, we." I closed my eyes. There are moments when your body understands danger before your mind forms the full sentence. This was one of them. "Did you tell them I approved this?" "Yes." "That's a lie." "It's basically true." That sentence made something hot and furious cut straight through my shock. "No," I said, "it absolutely is not." His tone shifted. Not apologetic. Irritated. "Why are you reacting like this?" I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because the audacity was so extreme it stopped feeling real. "Because you forged my signature on reproductive medical consent forms." "Oh my God," he snapped. "Stop making it sound criminal." Because it was. But what terrified me most was not even the forgery. It was how normal he thought this was. How completely justified he sounded. "We've been talking about this for months," he said. "No, we've been talking about the future." "Exactly. That is not the same thing. You keep delaying everything." My grip tightened so hard around the phone, my hand hurt. "Delaying?" "Yes." The word came out fast now, sharper, uglier. "Every time we get close to moving forward, you add another condition. Another timeline, another emotional checkpoint." I stared at the hallway floor like it might rearrange itself into a version of reality that made sense. "Marcus, these are my frozen eggs." And that single word made my stomach turn. Because in his mind, that fact apparently changed nothing. I swallowed hard. "They exist because I had cancer." Which is exactly why we shouldn't waste more time. That sentence hit me so hard I physically flinched. There are betrayals that hurt because they are cruel. And then there are betrayals that hurt because they reveal someone has been translating your pain into something useful for themselves. This was the second kind. "You do not get to use my medical trauma as leverage. I'm trying to build a family with you." "No," I said quietly. "You're trying to force a decision." He exhaled hard. Evelyn, I'm serious about us. So serious you impersonated me? We're together. That phrase again. Like being his girlfriend somehow dissolved my legal identity. Dating me never made you my authorization. Silence. Then a colder voice. You're being dramatic. That phrase. Because women hear some version of that their entire lives. The moment a boundary becomes inconvenient, suddenly we're irrational. My voice dropped lower. Did the clinic actually process anything? A pause. Too long. And that pause terrified me more than anything else he had said. Marcus. They were moving things. Every sound around me disappeared. What does that mean? It means the process was starting. When? Next week? I genuinely could not breathe for a second. Because suddenly this was no longer some abstract violation. It was scheduled, real, advancing. My body went cold in a way panic doesn't usually feel. Cold and hyperclear. Marcus. What? Did you actually think I would go along with this? He sounded offended. I thought once you saw I was serious, you'd stop stalling. That was the moment the emotional fog lifted. This was not desperation, not romantic recklessness, not a misunderstanding. This was coercion disguised as commitment. He was not asking. He was cornering. Every conversation from the past 3 months replayed in my head with horrifying new meaning. The pressure, the timelines, the we're not getting younger speeches, the subtle guilt. He had not been trying to persuade me. He had been preparing this. Marcus, I said, every word clipped and steady. What you did is illegal. No, it isn't. Yes. No, it's not. You forged my name. We're in a committed relationship. That changes absolutely nothing. You're acting insane. No, I said, voice suddenly calm in the way anger becomes dangerous when it fully settles. I'm acting like someone whose medical consent was violated. Oh, please. That did it. Completely. Every last ounce of softness disappeared. Do not contact the clinic again. Evelyn! Do not. Then I hung up. And for a few seconds, I just stood there in that hallway, completely motionless. Not crying, not breathing properly, just standing. The weird thing about shock is how ordinary the world looks while your internal reality is collapsing. A coworker walked past holding coffee. Someone laughed from a conference room. A printer started making that awful mechanical clicking sound. Everything looked normal. And I had just learned the man I loved thought my reproductive future was something he could access if he pushed hard enough. I walked outside because suddenly the building felt too small, too bright, too full of oxygen I still couldn't seem to use. I sat in my car and stared through the windshield for nearly 15 minutes. Then survival mode took over. I called the only lawyer I knew, the attorney who handled my condo closing years earlier. He answered on the second ring. Evelyn, I need help. Something in my voice must have told him this was serious. I explained everything in one breathless rush. Then silence. Then, that's not my field, he said carefully, but I know exactly who you need. He gave me the number for a reproductive law attorney, a phrase I never imagined would become relevant to my life. I called immediately. A woman answered. Calm, efficient, zero wasted words. I explained the situation. By the end of it, she asked only one question first. How long ago did this happen? Today. Has anything been released yet? I don't know. Then we assume urgency. That sentence steadied me instantly. Not because I felt safe. Because finally, someone else understood the seriousness immediately. She began drafting emergency communication while instructing me to call the clinic right now. So I did. The first employee transferred me. Then another. Then another. By the time I reached someone senior enough to actually understand what I was saying, I was shaking. A man identifying himself as my partner forged my signature on release authorization for reproductive material under my account. Silence. Then hold music. 11 minutes. I counted everyone. When the patient coordinator returned, her tone had changed completely. Professional. Controlled. Concerned. Ms. Hart, she said carefully, we did receive an authorization request under your file. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might be sick. No. The request included release preparation documentation. I shut my eyes. That signature is forged. A long pause. Then, we are freezing all movement immediately. For the first time since Marcus called, I inhaled fully. But relief lasted maybe 3 seconds. Because then she added, you need to come in tomorrow morning to verify identity and review documentation. I swallowed. Okay. No materials will move without confirmation. Okay. We are escalating this internally. Okay. I barely remember ending the call, or calling my attorney back, or driving home. I remember fragments, red lights, a gas station sign, the steering wheel under my hands, The strange emotional numbness that comes after panic burns through your body too fast. By the time I got home, I was emotionally wrecked, exhausted, shaking, completely hollow. And then I opened my apartment door. Marcus was sitting on my couch with one ankle resting over his knee, flipping through channels like it was an ordinary Wednesday night. The television was on. A glass of water sat on my coffee table. My throw blanket was folded beside him. The scene was so offensively normal that for half a second, my brain rejected reality. Like maybe I had imagined the phone call. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe stress had distorted something. Then he looked up, smiled faintly, and said, "Oh, hey, did you eat? I was thinking Thai." Thai food. That was his opening line. Not, "I'm sorry." Now we need to talk. Not, "Please let me explain." Thai food. I stood frozen in the doorway with my keys still in my hand, staring at him like I was looking at a stranger wearing Marcus's face. Because something had changed. Not just my trust. My perception. The man I had loved for nearly 2 years suddenly felt emotionally unrecognizable. "I called the clinic," I said. His body stilled. Small movement. Barely visible. But I saw it, and I called a lawyer. That changed his expression immediately. The softness vanished. "What? A lawyer? You called a lawyer?" The disbelief in his voice was almost surreal, as though that was the shocking part of the evening. I laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because anger had reached that strange edge where laughter feels safer than screaming. "You forged my signature on reproductive medical authorization forms." Marcus stood. Fast. "Oh my God, Evelyn." "No." I held up a hand. "Do not start by acting confused. This is insane." "No, Marcus, it is absolutely not. You keep acting like I stole something." I stared at him, then said the quietest, most honest version of the truth. "You tried to." That landed hard. I saw it. Just for a second, something flickered in his face. Not guilt. Offense. Like I had been unfair. "You're twisting this." "No." "Yes." His voice sharpened. "We've been together for almost 2 years. And? We've talked about kids. And? I want a future with you." I stepped farther into the apartment and shut the door behind me. The click sounded strangely final. "Do you hear yourself?" Marcus ran a hand through his hair. Frustrated now. "I'm trying to move our life forward." "By forging my name?" "Because you keep delaying everything." That word again. Delaying. As if my timeline was an inconvenience instead of my right. I dropped my bag onto the counter harder than intended. "Those eggs exist because I had cancer." "I know." "No," I snapped. "You know the story. That is not the same thing." Silence. And suddenly something inside me cracked open. Not fear. Clarity. Because for weeks, maybe months, I had been trying to interpret Marcus generously. Trying to explain his pressure as anxiety. His impatience as emotional investment. His persistence as love. But standing there, looking at him in my living room, I realized something devastating. Generosity only works when both people are acting in good faith. And he wasn't. "I need you to explain one thing," I said. Marcus crossed his arms. "What? What exactly did you think would happen?" He blinked. "What?" "Best case scenario." I took a step closer. "Walk me through it." He looked irritated now. "I already told you." "No, tell me the actual fantasy." My voice had gone eerily calm. "Did you think I'd panic for a few hours, then decide you were romantic?" He said nothing. "Did you think violating my medical consent would somehow make me feel more secure with you?" Still nothing. "Or did you think I'd be so emotionally exhausted I'd just surrender?" His face hardened. "That's not fair." I laughed again, this time sadder, because that answer told me everything. Then came the pivot, the emotional maneuver, the one manipulative people use when logic stops protecting them. Suddenly Marcus looked hurt. Genuinely hurt. Like he had been betrayed. "Are you really doing this?" That sentence almost would have worked on the old version of me. The Evelyn who softened quickly. The Evelyn who over-explained. The Evelyn who believed emotional pain automatically meant emotional sincerity. But not tonight. "Yes," I said. His face changed. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." "No." "Yes." "No, Marcus." I met his eyes directly. "Love is not medical authorization." That shut him up for exactly 2 seconds. Then came the cruelest pivot yet. "This is because of your trauma." I went completely still. "What?" "Cancer." His voice lowered, almost careful, which somehow made it worse. "Cancer made you controlling." For a moment, I genuinely could not process the sentence. Not emotionally, neurologically. Like my brain needed extra time to understand that the man standing in front of me had just weaponized the most painful chapter of my life because I refused to let him violate my consent. He stepped closer. "You obsess over control because your body betrayed you." The silence in the apartment became terrifying, because there are insults. And then there are violations so intimate they feel surgical. I stared at him, not crying, Not yelling, just staring. And somewhere deep inside me, something old and fragile died. He kept going. Every conversation has to happen on your timeline. Get out. Marcus blinked. What? Get out. Evelyn, get out. He threw both hands up. See, this is what I mean. You become impossible the second someone challenges you. No, I said. My voice was frighteningly calm now. I become impossible when someone commits fraud and expects dinner afterward. That landed. His expression hardened. You're being dramatic. That phrase again. The same lazy attempt to make female boundaries sound irrational. But something had shifted too far now. I no longer needed him to understand me. I just needed him gone. Give me your key. His eyes narrowed. Seriously? Yes. This is punishment. No, I said. This is consequence. For the first time all night, real uncertainty crossed his face. Because I think until that moment, part of him still believed this was salvageable through pressure, guilt, or emotional exhaustion. He thought I would eventually calm down, eventually explain, eventually soften. Instead, I stood there waiting, silently. And eventually, he pulled the key from his pocket and threw it onto the coffee table. It slid across the wood and hit the remote. You'll regret this. Maybe he meant the relationship. Maybe the legal escalation. Maybe both. But in that moment, regret was nowhere near what I felt. What I felt was grief. Because betrayal hurts differently when the person doing it still thinks they're reasonable. Marcus grabbed his jacket. At the door, he turned back once. This didn't have to become a legal circus. I looked at him for a long second, then answered with absolute honesty. Neither did fraud. He left. The door slammed hard enough to shake the framed photo by my bookshelf. And the second the apartment went silent, I collapsed. Not elegantly. Not the kind of crying movies make beautiful. Ugly, breathless, floor-level grief. Because people think betrayal hurts because of what happened. But often, what actually destroys you is realizing how wrong you were about who someone was. I cried until my chest hurt, until my throat burned, until exhaustion finally numbed me. The next morning, I arrived at the fertility clinic 15 minutes early and still felt late. That's the strange thing about panic. Time stops emotionally while continuing normally for everyone else. I barely remember the drive there. Just fragments. Red lights. A woman jogging with a stroller. A coffee shop drive-through line. The ordinary cruelty of a normal morning continuing while your life feels surgically altered. The compliance officer met me personally in a private conference room. That alone told me this was serious. No cheerful receptionist energy. No routine patient paperwork. Just quiet legal faces and institutional discomfort. A staff attorney was already there. That made my stomach drop. Because lawyers do not get involved when something small happened. They sat me down, verified my identification, and pulled the authorization form onto a screen. Ms. Hart, the compliance officer said carefully, we need you to confirm this is not your signature. I looked at the document, and for a second I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, because the arrogance was breathtaking. It wasn't even a convincing forgery. Marcus had signed my full legal name in handwriting so obviously his that it almost felt insulting. No effort to imitate me. No sophistication. No subtlety. Just entitlement in ink. Like the act itself never needed to survive scrutiny, because he assumed scrutiny would never happen. That's not mine, I said. The attorney nodded once. Measured. Professional. No dramatic reaction. Which somehow made the whole thing feel worse. Because violations become colder when processed institutionally. The attorney folded his hands. If you had not called yesterday. He paused. And I knew, even before he finished, that whatever came next was going to stay with me. Release preparation would likely have moved forward. I stared at him. What does that mean? He chose his words carefully. It means release processing could have advanced into the next authorization stage. I blinked. Slowly. Like my brain needed extra time to translate English into emotional reality. And if that happened? Silence. Then, reversal would have been extremely unlikely. That sentence didn't hit all at once. It arrived in layers. First intellectually, then physically, then emotionally. I sat there staring at a legal stranger while my entire body went cold. Because suddenly this was no longer about paperwork, no longer about forgery, no longer even about betrayal in the emotional sense. It was theft, potential permanent theft, one of the few biological chances I had left. Gone, because a man got impatient. I swallowed hard and asked the only question that mattered. So if I ignored the phone call, the attorney nodded slowly. Possible irreversible consequences, yes. That was the moment the horror became fully real. Because up until then, some part of me had still been functioning in emotional language. Boyfriend. Boundary violation. Relationship collapse. Trust. But this was clinical destruction. Material loss. Permanent medical harm. And the worst part was imagining how easily it could have happened. If I had been in a meeting, if I had ignored Marcus's calls, if I had convinced myself he was bluffing, if I had chosen emotional denial because the truth felt too ugly, that thought made me physically nauseous. The compliance officer apologized. Genuinely, repeatedly. The clinic admitted internal verification procedures had failed. Marcus knew enough personal information to appear legitimate. Date of birth, storage history, relationship details, pieces of my life I had handed over during intimacy. That realization made me feel dirtier than I expected, because betrayal isn't only about what someone does. It's also about realizing trust itself became the weapon. The clinic immediately added emergency restrictions. In-person identity verification only. No release without government ID. Secondary authorization flags. Manual legal review. No exceptions. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt hollow. Because safety after near catastrophe doesn't feel peaceful. It feels exhausting. My reproductive attorney met me that afternoon. Sharp, calm, efficient. The kind of woman who had clearly spent years professionally dismantling entitled people. She laid everything out with terrifying clarity. Emergency injunction, fraud documentation, protective access restrictions, possible criminal exposure, civil remedies, compliance reports. The language was clinical, but for the first time since Marcus's call, I felt something close to steadiness, because she treated what happened exactly as seriously as it deserved. No minimizing, no emotional reinterpretation, no relationship misunderstanding. Just facts. I didn't realize how much I needed that until it happened. Because when someone violates you intimately, shame sneaks in quietly. You feel stupid for trusting them, embarrassed that strangers are now handling your private pain professionally, ashamed that something so personal now exists in legal paperwork. But listening to that attorney calmly explain my rights did something important. It reminded me this was not my shame to carry. Marcus created this, not me. By that evening, emergency legal protections were already moving. I changed the locks on my condo. The locksmith was an older man with kind eyes and terrible small talk. Bad breakup? He asked casually while replacing the deadbolt. I almost laughed. Something like that. By morning, Marcus started calling. Blocked. Then texting. Blocked. Then emailing. Blocked. Then unknown numbers. Blocked. He left voicemails. I didn't listen. Everything went directly to my attorney. I had no emotional bandwidth left for improvisational manipulation. Then his mother called. I almost didn't answer. I should have trusted that instinct. I had met her only a few times. Holiday dinners. One birthday brunch. A Thanksgiving where she asked far too many questions about grandchildren with the smiling aggression certain women have perfected. Polished. Controlled. Opinionated. I answered because some irrational part of me thought maybe she was calling to apologize. Instead, she opened with, "What exactly is wrong with you?" No hello. No hesitation. Straight to accusation. I closed my eyes. Excuse me? How dare you humiliate my son with lawyers? There it was. Humiliation. Not forgery. Not medical fraud. Not consent. His embarrassment was apparently the real tragedy. Your son forged my signature. He told me you agreed to move forward. No. Well, I don't care what he told you. That changed her tone immediately. Because I think she expected softness. Explanation. Defensiveness. Not firmness. He wants a family, she snapped. That sentence made my jaw tighten, as if wanting something magically legalized taking it. That does not matter. It absolutely matters. No. Yes. She inhaled sharply. Maybe if you hadn't been stringing him along. I laughed. Cold. Tired. Disbelieving. Stringing him along? You kept delaying. The exact same language. Of course. Patterns like Marcus rarely emerge in isolation. Because I was not ready. Well, maybe he got tired of waiting. And there it was. The worldview. Entitlement dressed as devotion. Violation reframed as romance. Persistence marketed as love. I leaned against my kitchen counter and said, "Your son committed fraud. Don't be dramatic." That phrase again. As predictable as it was insulting. Well, maybe if cancer hadn't made you so controlling. For a second, I genuinely thought I misheard her, because cruelty that specific should sound impossible. But no, she had said it. In that moment, Marcus made a little more sense, and not in a way that made me feel better. I took a slow breath, then said the calmest thing I had said all day. This conversation is over. She called back twice. I ignored both. Then she texted, "If you don't drop this legal nonsense, people will learn what kind of woman you really are." Screenshot. Forwarded to my attorney immediately. Because by then, everything became evidence. And somewhere in the middle of all that legal chaos, one realization settled heavily into my chest. This was no longer about saving a relationship. It was about surviving what one had become. By the second week, I had stopped expecting shock. That may sound strange, but when someone violates you in a way specific enough to alter how you think about trust, your nervous system adapts faster than your heart does. The heart still grieves. It still replays old memories at inconvenient hours. It still remembers tenderness and asks dangerous questions like, was any of it real? But your nervous system becomes efficient. Block numbers, save screenshots, forward emails, sleep badly, function anyway, repeat. That was my life. Technically, I was working, showing up to meetings, answering emails, making polite conversation, pretending I was fine in the kind of socially acceptable way women become frighteningly good at. Inside, I felt like someone had replaced my bloodstream with adrenaline and exhaustion. Then Marcus made the mistake that finally destroyed whatever sympathy I still had left. He emailed 3 of my closest friends from a brand new address, because by then, every other route to me was blocked. I found out because Camille called first. The second I answered, she didn't say hello. She said, "Whatever this is, I already know something's wrong." That sentence nearly broke me, because after days of being gaslit, legally processed, emotionally cornered, and reframed as unstable, being believed immediately felt almost unbearable. I swallowed hard. Forward it. She did. I opened the email, and honestly, it was horrifyingly polished. Marcus had rewritten the entire story. In Marcus's version, we had planned this together. I suddenly panicked, and he was now being punished for trying to move our future forward. A misunderstanding. I read that word 3 times. Not because I doubted myself, because I was trying to understand how someone could lie that cleanly. The ending was the worst part. I think you deserve to know what kind of woman your friend really is. That sentence sat in my chest like acid, because this was a man who had held me after oncology appointments. A man who knew exactly what I survived. And now he was trying to convert my trauma into character evidence. Camille called back immediately. This reads like a terrified man. I closed my eyes. Yeah. What do you need? Simple question. But after weeks of legal language and emotional contamination, it nearly made me cry. Because genuine support sounds radically different from manipulation. The other 2 friends forwarded the same email. No suspicion. No accusation. Just disbelief. What the hell is this? So I told them. Everything. The forged signature. The clinic. The emergency freeze. The compliance report. The near release. The injunction. The mother's threats. The entire ugly truth. And every single one of them reacted the same way. Shock. Then rage. Then loyalty. Marcus had expected reputation control. Instead, he handed me witnesses. And then he made an even bigger mistake. One of my friends worked at a law firm. Not as an attorney, but close enough to recognize exactly how reckless Marcus had just become. False narrative pressure. Witness contamination. Potential intimidation. The email was forwarded to my attorney within the hour. Added to the file. Documented. Preserved. That gave me a strange kind of satisfaction. Not revenge. Not joy. Just clarity. Because manipulative people eventually overplay their hand. They become too confident in their own storytelling. And when they do, they stop realizing they're generating evidence. A few days later, my attorney called. The district attorney was moving forward. Formal charges. I sat in her office while she explained the details, and for a strange moment, I felt disconnected from my own life. Because hearing your boyfriend described in prosecutorial language is surreal. Forgery. Fraud. Unauthorized reproductive access attempt. These sounded like headlines, not memories. He's facing serious consequences, my attorney said. And I wish I could tell you I felt victorious. I didn't. I felt exhausted in the kind of way that goes deeper than sleep. Because justice sounds emotionally satisfying in theory. In reality, it's paperwork, strategy, anxiety, and repeatedly reopening wounds for people in suits. Marcus's attorney reached out almost immediately. Different tone this time. Gone was the entitlement. Gone was the confidence. Now there was urgency. Negotiation language. Settlement interest. Damage control. Apparently, consequences make clarity arrive quickly. My attorney asked me what I wanted, and that question haunted me, because part of me wanted destruction. Full prosecution. Maximum consequences. Every legal scar available. Not because I'm cruel, because what Marcus did was not impulsive. It was methodical. He researched the clinic, used personal account details, filled out documentation, signed my name, scheduled movement. Every step required choice. That matters, because accidents don't have timelines. But another part of me, the exhausted part, wanted silence, wanted this over, wanted my life back. Trauma creates strange priorities. Sometimes justice matters less than peace. Sometimes closure matters more than punishment. So we negotiated. But my conditions were absolute. First, Marcus pleads guilty. No vague wording, no technical loophole, no public ambiguity. Guilty. On record. Second, 5-year restraining order. No contact with me, my family, my employer, my close friends. No indirect messaging, no surprise appearances, nothing. Third, full reimbursement of legal fees. Every cent. Fourth, permanent prohibition from accessing any fertility systems, accounts, clinics, or records connected to me. Ever. And fifth, the one that made Marcus's attorney visibly angry, a formal written apology to the clinic employee whose professional standing was endangered because Marcus exploited procedural trust. Apparently that felt humiliating. Interesting? Because violating my reproductive consent somehow hadn't. My attorney's response was surgical. Your client forged reproductive documentation. Perspective would be useful. They accepted. And just like that, there was a court date. That should have felt like progress. Instead, it felt terrifying. Because endings are frightening when you've spent weeks surviving chaos. Then Marcus sent one final email. New address. Subject line. Can we please be adults? I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it unread. Because adulthood would have been asking, and if he still didn't understand that by now, nothing I said was going to teach him. But the hardest part wasn't the legal process. It wasn't the charges. It wasn't even seeing my private pain become case material. The hardest part was grieving someone who still technically existed. Marcus wasn't dead. He wasn't gone. He was just emotionally unrecognizable. And somehow that made mourning him even harder. Because grief is simpler when the person disappears. It becomes much uglier when they stay alive long enough to become someone else in front of you. The hearing was set for Thursday morning, and suddenly the ending felt more terrifying than the fight. I barely slept the night before the hearing, not because I was afraid of Marcus. That part had changed. Fear had long since burned into something colder and steadier. What kept me awake was grief, because people assume legal action kills love instantly. It doesn't. Sometimes love survives long after trust dies. Sometimes your heart takes an embarrassingly long time to catch up with what your mind already knows. So I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying 2 different men in my head. Marcus, the one who brought me soup when chemo left me too nauseous to stand. Marcus, the one who kissed the scar on my abdomen without making me feel broken. Marcus, the one who sat beside me during follow-up appointments and squeezed my hand when scan results took too long. And then Marcus, the man who forged my signature. The man who weaponized my cancer. The man who treated consent like a scheduling inconvenience. The emotional whiplash of loving both versions of the same person is something I still don't know how to explain cleanly. By morning, I felt emotionally hollow. My attorney met me outside the courthouse. Sharp suit, coffee in hand, composed in the way competent women somehow always look, even when carrying other people's disasters professionally. You okay? She asked. I considered lying. Instead, I gave her the truth. I don't know. She nodded. Fair. That simple answer steadied me more than fake reassurance would have. The courthouse itself was exactly what you'd expect. Cold air, muted footsteps, bad fluorescent lighting, institutional beige everywhere. A place designed to strip emotion out of deeply emotional things. Marcus was already there. Suit, tie, hair perfectly neat, trying very hard to look like a respectable man caught in an unfortunate misunderstanding. And for one dangerous second, my chest tightened, because he looked familiar. That's the cruel thing about betrayal. People don't physically transform into villains. They still look like the person who once made you laugh in grocery store aisles. Still look like the person whose hand you held during movies. Still wear the same face your nervous system once associated with comfort. That's what makes betrayal so disorienting. His mother sat behind him. Perfect posture. Sharp expression. A woman who still somehow believed her son was the true victim here. His father wasn't there. I later learned he refused to attend. That detail stayed with me longer than I expected. Because even in damaged families, sometimes one person quietly recognizes the line. Marcus looked at me once, briefly, then looked away. No dramatic confrontation. No whispered apology. No desperate speech. Just silence. The proceedings were procedural. Case numbers. Formal language. Legal terminology. Nothing cinematic. Real life rarely gives you the emotional choreography movies promise. Then came the moment that mattered. The judge looked directly at Marcus. Do you understand that you are pleading guilty to forgery involving reproductive medical authorization documentation? Silence. Marcus swallowed. Then, yes, Your Honor. That was it. 2 words. No speech. No explanation. No emotional framing. No manipulation. Just yes. And somehow that tiny word hit harder than everything else. Because for the first time since this nightmare started, it was reality without spin. No, you're overreacting. No, we wanted the same thing. No, this is a misunderstanding. No, I was trying to help. Just acknowledgement. Legal, plain, undeniable acknowledgement. I didn't realize how badly I needed that until I heard it. The judge accepted the agreement. Probation, financial restitution, 5-year restraining order, permanent access prohibition, full compliance conditions. The felony counts were resolved under the negotiated plea. A permanent conviction remained. It mattered, but less than I expected, because by then, I didn't need Marcus destroyed. I just needed him permanently separated from my future. After the hearing ended, people began filtering out. My attorney moved toward the clerk's desk. I stayed in the hallway longer than I should have, not because I wanted closure, because my body hadn't fully processed that the chaos was over. Then I heard my name. Evelyn. Marcus. I turned. Up close, he looked smaller somehow. Not physically, emotionally. Like consequences had reduced the version of himself he used to perform. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I never meant for it to go this far." That sentence nearly made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because men say that when accountability arrives faster than expected. You forged my signature. I know. You attempted to access my reproductive material. I know. You nearly cost me something I may never be able to replace. His jaw tightened. I know. And the strangest part, he sounded sincere, which somehow made it worse. Because sincerity after destruction does not rebuild anything. It only confirms the damage came from someone who still expected understanding. I wanted a family, he said quietly. There it was. Still centering desire. Still framing intention as emotional justification. I looked at him carefully. So did I. His expression shifted, because maybe, finally, he understood something he should have understood months ago. This was never about whether I wanted children. It was about whether I chose this timeline, this pressure, this violation, this version of motherhood. And the answer had always been no. I loved you, he said. Past tense. That word landed strangely, because part of me still loved who I thought he had been. That was the hardest truth. Healing does not require immediate emotional neatness. I nodded once. I know. He looked genuinely confused, then asked, "Then how are you standing here acting like none of that mattered?" That question hit something sharp. Because of course, to Marcus, boundaries looked like emotional coldness. To people who confuse love with access, refusal always feels cruel. So I stepped closer, met his eyes, and said the truest sentence I had learned through all of this. Loving someone does not require surrendering your consent. He looked away first. That mattered more than I expected. Then his mother passed us in the hallway. She didn't speak, but the contempt in her expression was almost theatrical, as if I had ruined her son's life instead of him forging reproductive documentation. And in that exact moment, I realized something liberating. That family would never understand what happened, and I no longer needed them to. After everyone left, I sat in my car in the courthouse parking structure. Same position as the night Marcus called, hands on the wheel, staring at concrete. Except this time, the silence felt different, less chaotic, more empty, and strangely, cleaner. I called my oncology clinic, not because I needed medical help, because I needed something familiar. The nurse who answered recognized my name instantly. That nearly broke me. Evelyn? Hi. You okay? I almost lied. Instead, I said, I'm trying to be. She laughed softly, kindly, and somehow that simple human warmth cracked something open in me. We talked briefly about my next follow-up appointment. 11 weeks. Routine. Ordinary. And after the call ended, I sat there thinking about survival. Real survival. Not courtroom survival. Not legal endurance. The first survival. Chemo. Surgery. Fear. Body grief. The version of me who froze those eggs while terrified she might never even live long enough to use them. That woman fought for possibility. And Marcus nearly treated that possibility like shared property. But he failed. The clinic overhauled its verification systems after the incident. Biometric identity checks. Government ID confirmation. Dual release verification. Apparently legal had wanted stronger protocols for years. Marcus accelerated change the ugliest possible way. At least maybe another woman gets safer because of it. That matters. Here's where I am now. Single. Healing. Still occasionally angry in strange, delayed ways. Still sometimes grieving the version of Marcus that probably never fully existed. My condo feels different. Quieter. Sometimes peaceful. Sometimes lonely. That's honest. Healing isn't cinematic. It's inconsistent. Some mornings I feel incredibly strong. Some mornings I hear his voice in my head. I handled the paperwork. And my skin still goes cold. Because that sentence revealed everything. Not the fraud, not the legal risk. The certainty. The absolute certainty that his desire outranked my right to choose. That's the part I'll never forget. I still have my 3 frozen chances. Still untouched. Still protected. Maybe one day, with the right man. A husband. A partner who understands respect without needing it explained. Maybe motherhood happens for me. Maybe it doesn't. But if it does, it will happen because I chose it. That's what this fight was really about. Not fertility, my future. And after surviving cancer, betrayal, and a courtroom, reclaiming that future feels like surviving all over again.